Hi everyone. Today I'm joined with Richard Engelmann, Regional Vice President for Asia, Oceania and India at Japan Airlines. Thank you for joining me today, Richard. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So thank you so much for joining. And for anyone watching, we're going to be talking generally around retail distribution and the impact of technology in the industry. So before we begin, Richard, would you be able to introduce yourself and elaborate a bit on your wealth of experience in the industry?
Absolutely, yes. I've been in the aviation industry for quite a few number of years, mostly in Asia. I think nearly all in Asia, and places like India, Bangladesh, Philippines, Hong Kong, Australia, Japan, China, Philippines. I think I have mistake on Hong Kong. Sorry, and this one. Oh, and Japan, where we are now. So I've really enjoyed travel through the course of my life, and as you got from the name, Engelmann is a German surname, British national. I have an Australian permanent resident, a Japanese passport, as well as a Japanese working visa, and a British passport. So good luck with the algorithm to try and catch me on this one. But it's a pleasure to be here, and welcome to the World Aviation Festival.
Perfect. Just beginning with the questions then. What can the aviation industry learn through technological advancements made in other industries?
Well, well, definitely not self-drive yet, although that is a particularly interesting development. The EV vehicles are developing rapidly, the Tesla models and things like that. They'll never say never. That could be something that comes our way later on. But definitely content and customer information that is held with big players like Google, Amazon, and Meta, algorithmic targeting for advertising and ancillary sales is far more sophisticated than airlines. The whole customer data piece is something that we can learn from in terms of development. The AI and digital identities, things like the recency of Microsoft acquiring ChatGPT, the actual moving away from chatbots to artificial interactions with people who have access, or rather machines that have access to the entire world of data in the internet. That's fascinating. Multimodal travel connections, cars, trains, planes, buses, interconnectivity. That's something too. Of course, another topic you're going to talk about, sustainable or other sustainability or SAF. That's also something that's in other industries are working on, that we are very closely associated with, which is something which is good news coming. And yeah, just generally technological advances that are going to be real customer driven future. Really, that's something we could learn a lot from.
Okay, that's really interesting. And you mentioned briefly ChatGPT. Have you had a chance to speak with it yet?
I have. I've asked it many questions. In fact, I asked it to come up with a joke to open a presentation at the World Aviation Festival in the style of Stuart Francis, and it
Did
did.
it deliver?
It did deliver, but it wasn't a terribly funny joke. So I thought I'll keep it there. I did ask it what the price of Bitcoin was going to be at the end of this year. So
Ah.
I'll leave that for everybody else to do their own research. But the fascinating thing is, it is actually as good as asking somebody, because my wife was saying it's just the same as Siri or Alexa. I said it's nothing like it. I mean, you can type a full, please write me a chapter in the style of Charles Dickens of an opening, and it will do that basically. It's absolutely fascinating,
Yeah,
really
it's sort of
fascinating.
checkers and chess almost, isn't it? When you actually
Yeah.
interact with it, it's unbelievable. Can you see it having a big impact on the aviation industry?
Oh, absolutely. In travel, I mean, one of the, I think I've seen it on LinkedIn. One of the requests that somebody put into it was, can you please act as a tour guide in this city, knowing the fact that I've come from a background of fine art and I don't want to go to touristy places. And the reply from ChatGPT was all about, well, I would avoid going to this area. This is where I would go, and there's a wonderful little gallery down the back of this street, and blah blah blah. And I was reading this thing. I thought somebody written that themselves. I couldn't work out to be an AI interaction. Amazing, really. I
Yeah.
just think the future, and it's going to get better the more that people interact with it and smarter. So yes, I think travel has a huge impact. Will have a huge impact if something like that comes along.
Yeah, I was sort of looking at it the other day actually, and it looks like it can present information in a way that's very palatable to people. It's sort of the way you want to hear words said back to you. So one of the sort of example applications we were looking at was in within the aviation industry, was using this as your almost travel companion in the airport. So say, and it can just give you all the information without having to go to multiple sources. And obviously it's all about optimizing and efficiency. So it looked like the
Exactly.
possibilities were pretty endless for most industries.
I think so, and that coupled with the metaverse, which when it finally gets back on its feet after having been knocked over, I think that's another opportunity. Augmented reality, virtual reality. Walking through certain airports. Checking out a Japan Airlines business class seat. This type of thing is there's just endless possibilities in tech. In the future of tech, ChatGPT, metaverse, and a host of other things.
Very exciting time, I guess.
Absolutely.
Are there any specific developments, sort of beyond ChatGPT, I guess, in tech and innovation that you're excited to see within the airline retailing distribution space?
Well, I think accessibility or mobility and accessibility is one of the ones that's actually here now. I know if we talk about the future of travel, I mean, what we're seeing the sort of incremental changes in what we're seeing now in terms of like data digitalization, that type of thing is becoming real. Or putting the choices literally into the customer hands. That's the type of thing. Again, I mentioned about this sort of algorithmic predictive things and things like that. There's so much more data and going around there ever was in any part of my life before. So that type of thing is hugely valuable for travel. And with tech comes things like managing more, self-managing more, including things like refunds, disruptions, transaction fees, complicated itineraries. Doing that yourself if you've got the wherewithal, if the tech can support it. Pre and post flight, pre and post flight travel related services, automation, and we mentioned ChatGPT or an equivalent of that in the travel space. And the other thing that's quite exciting, things like for us, the next generation air mobility, like drones and EVTOLs and those sort of things, that brings accessibility to airports, much easier transportation, all that sort of thing. It's gone at an exponential growth from when I was in China. They were trialing this thing called the smart cart, where was literally an iPad on it that would identify where you were in the airport and make recommendations for things around you based on your booking. So if you had families, here is a fried chicken restaurant, or here is a shop or something else like that. And I thought, that was what 5 years ago, and I thought how exciting that was. To now everything being through mobile, what they call m-commerce. We moved from e-commerce to m-commerce.
Yeah.
So that's all really exciting stuff. But I think I saw the IATA survey of young people said, I think it was over 70% of them said they don't want any documentation in the future. They just want to be able to go through an airport entirely without any contact at all, apart from obviously things like security, which at the moment can't be circumnavigated. Everything else could be a digital process, and so those type of developments, and then and then retailing. Go back to your point about purchasing options. Therefore, you can see the entire journey. Before you travel yourself, rather than bits of it being disjointed elsewhere. So that's happening now, and that's quite. And I think I came through Hong Kong Airport, and biometrics in terms of face recognition, boarding at the gates, and things like that. These are all innovations that are already in the customer space, I guess, not just retailing, but customer space.
That's great. And sort of a lot of what you talked about almost comes under that umbrella of more personalization, and everyone wants everything tailored to them. Um, So a lot of the developments you talked about to do with data and like mobiles will really help with that, I guess. And just the second point was a couple of the things you were saying. It's tying in with keeping up with advancements in other industries. So um, a lot of shops, etc., not in airports or aviation are paperless or contactless cards only, and there's sort of trying to keep that reflected in the aviation industry, which is famously a bit slower to adopt these technologies.
Absolutely. And the other aspect, of course, is for where I am in across Asia and India and Australia, is the cultural nuance, cultural aspects of travel. Some people still like to have the face-to-face contact with a travel agent and don't trust online payment systems and other bits and pieces. People are naturally reticent to put more and more of their own personal data online because there's an awful lot of scammers out there and options like that. So each market will have its own process of evolution and its own concerns, and I think that's going to be, one of the big challenges is to meet that sort of things as well, particularly with languages, translations, cultural tailoring, etc. Those type of things are going to be taken into consideration. If you've used any of these translation services online, some of them are just, still really poor when they give you back an unintelligible answer for something that was quite straightforward. So languages is another aspect which I would like to see a lot more investment in.
That's a really interesting point and one that I haven't heard come up as much. So, are you able to go into any more detail on that?
Oh, I can absolutely. My wife is a simultaneous interpreter and translator. This is her job, and she's in the process of working in exactly that industry. And what she points out is there are some words in Japanese, for example, and some words in English that just simply don't translate. They don't exist in either language. So if you put them in a context of a sentence, the sentence can be completely misconstrued or not, open, ambiguous rather in terms of its meaning, and therefore you can either be terribly rude, terribly polite, or just simply not understood. Now I've learned that because my Japanese is fairly basic, and when I use words, that they're just out of context, it's very difficult. So there's certain honorific levels, as you know, in some countries, especially Japan and Thailand. There are certain honorific levels at which you speak to people in the travel as well. So that's the whole cultural aspect is something that really needs to be reviewed. We're very good at machine learning translations or machine learning AI that simply translates word for word, and it doesn't come across. If you and I are talking to each other, and then we were suddenly talking Japanese to each other, the meaning would and the tone and the register of voice and everything is completely different. We're a long way away from that. So I think in terms of travel, complicated travel itineraries, I think we're a long way away from getting something that will be multicultural, multi-language.
That's really fascinating. Thank you. And so, sort of having spoken a little bit about why people might still want that customer contact and human interaction, are you able to highlight some of the ways that technical innovation is already improving experience for customers in the retail space?
Sure, I guess probably retail and service space because I think
Yeah.
it's not one or the other. I mean, it was a good example that during the pandemic, Japan Airlines had a robotic concierge service at the airport, operated by the Japan Airlines staff at home. So they had a remote control for an avatar robotic concierge at an airport. So if a customer went and asked this robot, rather than get an automated reply, they were actually interacting with somebody who was operating it from their seat at home, and that be able to provide them with the normal meet and greet services, directions, and other bits and pieces. Where at that point the non-human contact was essentially an important aspect of security, or rather health and security at the airport. So that's a good example of how things are changing. We mentioned things about them. There's a shift away from sort of the traditional PSS systems to retailing platforms, FRPs, where the customer's experience now is much broader. As we said, the airline industry itself is a bit slow in the adoption or development of that compared to the likes of a Google or an Amazon or a Meta, where that interconnectivity, so personalization, connectivity, touch points, touchless travel, and e-money also is another thing. Other initiatives and implementation of things like self-service baggage drop. I mentioned about the biometrics, facial recognition, contactless self-check-in, and where you don't even touch the screens, that gives us a heightened level of hygiene. And also high sophistication of temperature controlled medical equipment at cargo space. So there's a general level across all different aspects of the customer travel, which we've seen developments in tech. But going back to our point at the very beginning of the call, it's really in its early stages of opportunities of next generation technology. We're getting there slowly.
Yeah, a work in progress. So is there, you sort of mentioned why some people might prefer human interaction at this stage of the sort of technological development. How are you seeing uptake of these things? Do people seem to want them? Is there a high demand for it, or does there seem to be just sort of an element of doing it for
It's definitely a
efficiency?
yeah, sorry, I cut over there. It's definitely a generational thing. The youngsters definitely are very tech savvy. It's as much as I can be to be up to speed with all the tech that's available, and so I think, and also it's a generational thing, but it's also a cultural thing. I think as I mentioned before, in Japan, for example, the Japanese are known for exceptional, polite, and high quality levels of service, a personal service, a very respectful level of service. It'll be a hard thing to replicate that, and so there's probably less of a desire to take on technology as an alternative to that, because because I live here in Japan, I can speak to that. I absolutely prefer the very polite and service that you get in Japan on Japan Airlines, and I wouldn't want to see that particularly automated. Now, having said that, the decisions in terms of the early parts of the retail, the planning, I would like the freedom to be able to use that. And we have seen, around Asia particularly, a significant shift towards online booking. So there is a desire certainly to have that element of it in one's own control, but the delivery of service definitely not in an automated way. The retailing, or rather the control of decision and choices, is very much in the hands or preferably in the hands of the customer now, as more so than it has been pre-pandemic.
That's great. And one of the things that's been spoken about quite a lot is how the role that the pandemic played in sort of catalyzing the technological adoption. So people got much better on their phones, Zoom, these sort of things out of necessity. So it sort of encourage people more towards that, as you said, m-commerce.
Yes, and definitely the sort of percentage in terms of, I think it was something released by the Tourism of Asia or something like that, about the number of people who were using online booking tools pre and post pandemic, and I forget the specific number. I certainly remember, say, for example, like Thailand, which was in the sort of late 40s, early 50%, had gone up to over 70% of people who are now using online booking tools for hotels, airlines, restaurants, etc., as opposed to pre-pandemic. So the adoption of tech is definitely quite clearly happening during the pandemic, and obviously after pandemic it stayed. It hasn't seen that reduce.
Yeah, that's great. So moving towards distribution now, is there a pattern to how we've seen distribution evolve over the last 5 years?
Yes, too slowly. That's the pattern. Really at a
In
snail's
short.
pace. Absolutely. In summary, too slowly. Other retailing industries I mentioned have outpaced the airline industry at an exponential pace. Amazon, Google, Expedia, airlines tend to not prioritize tech developments when during downturns in the industry, and this was the biggest downturn we've ever seen. So therefore, spend had to be reprioritized. Costs have been issues. So the tech developments have certainly slowed down even more during that period of time. Airlines tend to focus, as they should do, in infrastructure, safety, health and safety, aviation developments, customer comfort and innovation, the sort of things that's what our customers pay for. That's what they expect. So that's where the money is reprioritized into that, less so in tech developments. And the very big players have, a bucket loads of endless research and development and investment cash. So they will always outpace airlines in terms of that. I saw that many airlines, have dabbled in that, or have pre-pandemic were making very ambitious statements, but have yet to manifest or outpace the developing experts in this space. And I'm just wondering, whether one of those big players will emerge as the front runner. The issue for the airlines is whoever emerges the front runner, we want to avoid the associated costs that we had with booking systems such as GDSs previously, and the new tech, winners. We have to be careful that they don't just pass that on to airlines and of course onto the customers. That's the caveat. We hope they focus on quality of tech, but not at high cost. Ideal world.
Okay, that's great. So building from that, you've touched on it a little bit, but how do you expect to see this advance in the future?
Well, yeah, absolutely. This is the exciting part. I mean, in my view, and perhaps I think something you shared there. I'm a firm believer that we're at the edge of the next technological industrial revolution. I don't think since the invention of communication, TVs, phones, internet, satellites, we're about to see as much innovation of tech developments arrive in our space. The AI, the blockchain, digital identities, digital wallets, biometrics, genomics, developments in healthcare, Internet of Things, metaverse, decentralized finance. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Smart contracts, of course, and CBDCs, centralized digital currencies. I mean, just a phenomenal amount of things happening that will change everybody's future indefinitely, and hopefully, and my lifetime, we'll see these things come in there. So if you apply all of that to the retailing of travel and journeys and things like that, with just an entirely different world emerges. It's very exciting. Whether like when the internet evolved in that time, and I think the top 5 leaders in internet companies in the early 90s are now not even in the top 5. We don't know who the eventual big players will be. But I remember Yahoo was the biggest internet, and now it's not even in the top 10, and now we're Amazon and Google. So we'll see who evolves, and the debate would be endless to see who thinks who will emerge. But what will emerge is the technology evolution is coming. That's just a personal opinion, and anybody can debate that with me over a beer in at the breakout session. So
I'm sure people will be taking you up on that.
sure, people will tell me ad nauseum what their views are. I would just say be very careful to watch how things develop. Don't speculate.
Yeah. So you gave a pretty generous list of things that we can sort of expect to see, one of which being the metaverse, etc. Are there any of these things that you listed that you're particularly looking forward to or see a lot of potential in, or conversely, is there any of them that you see a lot of challenges arising from the implementation of?
Well, I certainly think from from my perspective, anything that makes the entire customer journey much simpler and easier would be something I'd be really encouraging. How far advanced that needs to be. I mean, the touchless or the self-managed travel is something that should be a choice. It's not necessarily an obligation for people. That's one thing. As we see tech develop, not everybody will be a natural adopter. So I think we shouldn't rush at these things. We should incrementally bring these things in. So as we've seen, I certainly think the biometrics or digital identities is something that I think is probably nearer to us than further away. And I do think, if you could go through an airport and not have multiple interactions and paperwork and passports and etc., I think that's going to be a huge benefit, as long as it is obviously properly regulated and managed and secure. That's definitely something I'd like to see. On a personal level, which is just my view and not necessarily one shared by Japan Airlines, but certainly maybe. But I think the digital evolution of money and the decentralized finance, well, not decentralized finance, but the sort of the freedom of use of money internationally. I mean, when I went, I still travel. I went with some cash to a travel desk, and they gave me, and then they exchanged it, and they gave me more paper back again, which now half of it didn't get used, as sitting in my wallet. We have to move on from that at some point. So instant transactions, financial transactions are something I would really love to see happen, especially because I live in Japan and I have family in Australia and in the UK. The cost of sending money across through banks is ridiculous in this day and age. We could just do it instantaneously. So the digital money is something I'd really love to see happen. And the other thing I think in the industry where there's an awful amount of costs involved are things like smart contracts, where I know the development of Ethereum, where you can now exchange goods and services and business agreements digitally between two people, and it's ratified and secure through the blockchain, etc. I mean, that's got to be a huge opportunity in the future coming down our way, especially for airlines, particularly where we have a huge amount of suppliers, contractors, and other service partners that we do business with, all of which are extremely expensive to facilitate. So that would be my personal view. I know that Japan Airlines is investing heavily in the innovation space in terms of customer service, so I can endorse that certainly as the future as well.
Wonderful. And this is something we've touched on a fair bit, but if you had anything extra you wanted to add, how have we seen customer demands and expectations shift since the pandemic?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because it has. I mean, there were so many versions of predictions and suggestions of how things were. Nobody really knew how this is a once in a lifetime, or actually twice in a lifetime, probably, situation where even the most qualified of medical predictors didn't get it right, and so we were really waiting to see. So in terms of airline travel, obviously the one consistent factor was nobody could. Therefore, the question would be what happens when they can, and how will that change? Would it be a very instant surge of growth, or would it be an incremental growth, or would people still be reticent to travel and because of certain things? So a number of different surveys came out from a number of the industry players, all of which gave a different version. The reality for us is that what we have seen from certain markets is a surge. But what has been interesting to see is that the surge is very much front of aircraft. There's been a very big growth of premium leisure. And I think this is pent up demand of people who said, we haven't been away, we haven't had a holiday, we haven't relaxed for several years, or a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and now we want to go, and it doesn't matter the cost. So they're very less price conscientious, and more service and quality. So we've seen a very big growth of the premium leisure market. Slower than we expected recovery of corporate demand, but I guess that's probably due to the fact that there is going to be, obviously, what do we call it? I'm trying to think of the word now. More focus on cost saving, on So like the corporate customers may be more conscious of corporate expenditure or capital expenditure, slowdown of capital expenditure, and therefore where last pre-pandemic 4 or 5 people would travel, now maybe just 1 or 2 do, or like we are talking now over the web, that's taken place of some of the business meetings. So business leisure we're very happy to support that market with our amazing products and services, and corporate we hope we'll see developing through the course of the year.
That's great, thank you. Just touching on that sort of business and leisure travel, the leisure travel that it's been calling. Is that have you seen a big shift in that within your airline? Is there, I know some airlines have been saying that they're seeing the days that these travelers are moving on shift. Is that something you've noticed?
No, just a very significant growth in demand across all markets, and a market that wants to move as quickly and as soon as possible. Inbound to Japan has seen an exponential growth, and especially in the business leisure and cabin, also families traveling in the premium cabins and booking nice hotels. Good for them, and so they should. And inbound Japan, especially because we have certain seasonal peaks, like the Momiji season in the November, where the leaves turn red, very beautiful season in Japan. The Sakura season, in April, March, and those peak demands are already pretty solidly booked up. So that's a really good news. So we haven't seen particularly a shift towards different days of the week, just more a shift towards can we get a booking and when can we go.
Fantastic. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the demands that we've just spoken about, but does technology play a role in meeting these sort of post-pandemic demands of customers?
Well, so the multimodal aspect does, because the multimodal travel where we're now more connected in terms of it was an airline seat and from A to B. Now there is connectivity to partnerships we have within hotels, like Japan Airlines has a partnership with the Marriott Hotel, promotional partnership, and also with some of the credit card suppliers. So the connectivity, the digital connectivity between those suppliers is very much playing a part in that, and the tech development, as I said, the online element, whereas customers would have just gone to an airline and booked that independent sector. Now they tend to want to book the entire of their itinerary in journey, including land arrangements, including hotels, including restaurants or other bookings, all now through m-commerce or mobility. So that definitely technology is playing a huge part in that.
Fantastic. So looking more towards Japan Airlines specific
Yep.
topics now, are you able to give me an overview of how you make Japan Airlines attractive to international travelers?
Sure. Okay. We talked a couple of things. The Japan Airline consistently ranks in the top group of world airlines. If you've done any of the surveys for service, style, quality, represents the very best of the Japanese reputation for superior service and superior style. Another element from my perspective, I'll talk about Asia, and then we'll talk about Central. From an Asia perspective, an increasing international workforce representing Japan Airlines in regional markets presents a much more globally minded face to communicate and promote the brand and service. So it makes it more accessible to our international markets. And a lot of the focus from a sort of Central perspective is based, so how do you make it more attractive? It's based on what the benefits for the customers are, in terms of, for example, don't just invest in the first and business class experience, but the premium travels. That we created our economy class product has the best industry seat, one of the best industry seat pitches. So rather than put extra seats on the aircraft, we provided a more comfortable experience for those leisure travelers, and that's been consistently awarded by Skytrax as one of the world's best economy class seats. And so those are something that we invest in order to be attractive to all customers, including our international markets. So we were also awarded the Apex World Class status for 2 consecutive years. One of only 8 airlines in the world to receive the Apex World Class 2023 certification. Overall, the guest experience is what we focus on, and we believe that international travelers are attracted to brands that they can relate to and that are authentic to whatever nationality that is represented. So through the content we share on social media platforms like Instagram, we try to inspire travel to these wonderful localities across Japan. Share stories about the Japanese culture, about our traditions, and the sort of wellness programs we run, and showcase initiatives that JAL has undertaken, so the audience can get to know us better. So I think that's probably things. So we've seen through market surveys that we've conducted that guests who have flown with JAL once are very likely to fly with us again once they've experienced the quality of service and products. So from my perspective, it is about initiating that relationship with our international markets, getting them to experience our service and communicate. And that's why, with the more international workforce, we have a stronger ability to communicate what those products and services are. And from that, as I say, we seem to be doing a pretty good job at the moment. And again, this is our inbound customer growth is significantly bigger than are currently outbound from Japan. So we're definitely appealing to a much more international audiences.
That's fantastic to see. Would you be able to explain a bit about sustainability in Japan Airlines?
Yeah, I'd be very happy to. It's an absolute top priority of Japan Airlines. We announced our SDG intentions at the 2020 shareholder meeting as far back as then, to be net zero by 2050. Now, a lot of airlines, a lot of other industries are following suit or have similar ambitions. So in order for us to achieve those objectives, there are 3 or 4 key criteria. Very briefly, one of the top ones, of course, is the aircraft. Before we get to sustainable aviation fuel, one of the initiatives that Japan Airlines is taking is with the fleet. So we now are introducing we've had to introduce the A350-900, which is a significantly more fuel efficient aircraft than some others. And later this year, we'll introduce the A350-1000, which is the potential to reduce 15 to 25% of fuel burn during that. So that's sort of the short-term management of that. In addition to these things, there's things like altitude management, flying at more fuel efficient levels, and other operational measures, single engine taxis and other bits and pieces, which we are attributing a further 5% contribution in that. The sort of key thing, I think, which all of your guests will be developing, or airline guests will be developing, of course, is the development of SAF, of the sustainable aviation fuel. We're a big investor in this, to a product produced in Japan and supported by a cooperative group of companies under the Act for Sky Group initiative. So this is a group that we're leading. We take a leading role in the SA and the SAF or SAF agenda. So this is a big part of that. But at this point, as we all know, developing SAF is highly expensive and unable to fulfill the quantities at this point. But definitely making the right sort of lead and initiatives as the company. The other sort of things we're doing right now, which is can make a big impact, is the reduction of single-use plastics across our fleet. We're replacing food lids with paper lids, plastic lids, everything that is single-use plastic can be removed or is being removed. Paper recycled options. We're also targeting food loss and waste and food choice options. Passengers can opt out rather than waste food. It's not an obligation, but it's just there if there's a social conscience to do that. We can facilitate that. So those are sort of key areas. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more going on. I could talk endlessly about, but we're big, strong. Commitment and highly engaged in achieving these objectives. So yeah, no, on last year, 18th of November, Japan Airlines, flew a sustainable charter flight, just to give us an idea of how we could make an impact in the future. So we trialed a flight. There was an A350-900 aircraft that flew from Haneda to Okinawa. The objective of that operation was to maximize all elements of sustainability on one flight that we are able to contribute at this point. And customers were invited to participate with us by showing their interest to purchase that journey, and they had the ability to offset their carbon footprint as well on that flight. So what was it? It was an aircraft that was fueled by SAF, and onboard the aircraft, the aircraft was pushed back by EVs, electric vehicles. Onboard service included sustainable meal service equipment, so everything on the aircraft was of a sustainable nature, vetted from sustainable suppliers, and no wasted elements of it at all. And one of the interesting thing was there was a meal prepared using the Future Food 50 ingredients. You've probably heard about that. They're biodiverse suppliers, non-meat options, such as a soya bean burger, which apparently was a big hit with all our customers on board the aircraft. The aircraft was a great success, a big bit of media coverage. I think there has been a few similar flights around the world. However, Japan Airlines just wanted Japan has wanted to trial the first of its type in Asia to see how it went. And it was a very large success, very big success, and what else to say? Very big success, and hope that's going to be the future of all aviation, all flights in the future.
That's really good to hear. So finally now, why are you joining us at Aviation Festival Asia? And sort of what are you looking forward to?
Well, what I'm most looking forward to is hearing what other people's opinions are on all the subjects you've just asked me. I say a lot of them, some of them are factual, but some of them are sort of personal opinions about how the future of the airline world will develop. Now, having been in the aviation business for 30 plus years, during my period of time, I've seen an awful lot of changes through that period. But I actually think the changes, if you were looking another 30 years or even less from that, are going to be significant. So I'd love to hear from all the tech innovators and all of the people who are working tirelessly to develop the future of aviation for my children and their children. I'd love to hear where that's going and to know where that's happening. I'd love motivated people, innovative and excited people about the future. I know I'm getting old now, so maybe I'm less excited about the future than I was, but I should be, and I am, and I can't wait to hear what everybody's views are and share in that same level of enthusiasm, despite me my age.
Fantastic. Well, I really look forward to seeing you there.
Can't wait. Looking forward to it, and lovely to hear your views as well on how the World's Aviation Festival globally is going, not just in Asia.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it, Richard.
Very welcome. It's been a pleasure talking to you.